Well, the bottom line here, sadly, and it's hard to hear, is the victim in this case wanted to bring her boyfriend home, and 6 days later, that man took her life as well as the life of her sister. It's all happening in this third-floor apartment here. People in this neighborhood still saddened, upset by what happened. Others saying it didn't need to happen.
On March 7th, 2016, Cheverly, Maryland was thrown into chaos after police officers discovered the bodies of a woman and her sister at around 10:30 p.m., lying helplessly at the Cheverly Station apartment complex. The officers, who were alerted to the sound of gunshots, were able to identify the bodies of 26-year-old Tarika Jones as well as 22-year-old Jalissa Walls Harris. While this was shocking enough, the officers would discover something even more troubling. A few days ago, the killer was in jail for another domestic case. One of the deceased women paid $20,000 to bail him out. Just a few days later, the police were called to the same residence where they made a gruesome discovery.
Less than a week before Kevin Reynolds murdered the mother of his child, Tarika Jones, and her sister, Jalissa Harris, he was bailed out of jail by Jones herself.
She did pay to have him removed from jail.
Judge Joseph Wright set the bond at $20,000. Prosecutors didn't object, and Reynolds was released.
This is the heartbreaking story of Tarika Jones. Before we begin, we would love to extend our deepest condolences to the family and friends of Tarika Jones, as well as everyone affected by the tragic event. For you to better understand the people in this story, let me share with you their backgrounds from Cheverly, Maryland. Being a suburb of Washington, D.C., Cheverly, Maryland has a higher than average crime rate. With violent crimes less common than property crimes, the town is less safe than most cities in Maryland. It is little wonder why the violence that took the life of Tarika Jones was reported from this very city. Tarika Lene Jones, born on May 21, 1989, in Prince George's County, Maryland, to Tawanda Jones Reed and the late Terry Lee Walls, lived a life that represented her ambition and resilience. She spent her childhood in Maryland, attending Calvert County Public Schools before graduating from Huntington High School in 2007. With a passion for education management, Tarika embarked on a journey of self-improvement, enrolling at Fortis College in Hyattsville, Maryland, to become a dental assistant. But her pursuit of a brighter future was about more than just personal ambition. There was a deeper purpose driving her every step. Tarika had 3 daughters at the center of her world. She wanted to make the best out of her life for her and her 3 girls. She made sure to take good care of them and did not fail to showcase them to the world via social media. However, there was one person she refused to showcase. It was the father of her youngest daughter. His name was Kevin Tyrese Reynolds from District Heights, Maryland. Kevin was involved in a romantic relationship with Tarika. As usual, their relationship was one filled with love and trust. The pair had been engaged in romantic dealings for a while, and everything went smoothly for some time. And then, the unusual began to happen. Kevin became a beast of nature. The pair became involved in constant fights that would sometimes draw the attention of neighbors, who most times did their best to stay out of a family issue. While the fights went on for a while, it is almost possible to miss one very unhealthy factor about these fights. It was the fact that they all happened in front of 3 growing female children. Most of them weren't mentally prepared to witness such confrontations. However, it may seem as though the situation was that of a handicapped situation with no one able to speak about it or do anything whatsoever about it. And usually, women in this type of position could only hope that things got better. However, in this particular case, it never did, because what was about to happen marked the beginning of the end for Tarika. In February, Kevin was dropping off their daughter when a heated exchange took place. Remember, Kevin and Tarika shared a daughter, and they put an arrangement in place, one which saw Kevin pick her up and drop her off on certain occasions. However, this occasion was a particularly different one, as it saw their daughter witness a side of her father she probably never knew existed. It was 6 p.m., and Kevin arrived in his usual fashion, where he'd park and Tarika would go pick her up from the front seat. But on this occasion, What Tarika didn't know was that Kevin had other plans. While she tried to pick up her baby, Kevin, who was calculating his move, rushed her, grabbed her, and threw her to the ground. As if this were not enough, he made an intentional charge towards her, where he continued his aggression by picking her up, tossing her about almost as if he was determined to end her that very minute. However, after much back and forth, Tarika was finally able to get back on her feet, and like a prey who managed to break free from the claws of a hungry predator, she scampered to safety, to the shelter of her neighbors. But while she must have felt the situation had died down, it was only just beginning. Just as she tried to call the police due to the fact that she still felt threatened, Kevin found a way to get at her and threw her phone away. Tarika, confused as the situation seemed helpless to her, still managed to get some other phone, and with Kevin not nearby but not so far off this time, tried to reach the police through 911. This time, the call went through. But just as the dispatcher was trying to get the location from which Tarika was calling from so they could send immediate help, Kevin could be heard visibly in the background screaming and yelling. The dispatcher needed no further information to know that this was indeed a grave danger situation that needed immediate intervention. Eventually, officers were sent to the location. It was when they got to the scene that Tarika admitted even more shocking information to them. According to her, Kevin thought she was on the phone with her other baby daddy, and in a moment of instant rage, ran back to his truck to pick up a handgun. Tarika, scared to death on the other hand, rushed to call the police. But then and there, something utterly unbelievable happened. Kevin's mother intercepted her almost as though she felt her pain and wanted to help her, but then seized her phone, ordering her not to call the police on her son. After the exclusive information, Kevin was arrested and charged with first-degree assault. While this should have brought smiles and relief to Tarika, this wasn't the case. In fact, quite odd and shockingly, the reverse was the case. You see, notwithstanding the fact that Tarika was at risk with Kevin not behind bars, she was a woman with a heavy load to carry. The burden of 3 demanding girls was no joke, and there was no denying that Kevin was useful in that aspect. A thought of this echoed through Tarika's head, and finally, Tarika went on to make the most costly decision of her life. She made a move at the county court expressing to them that she was no longer in fear for her life and that she wanted Kevin released. Initially, Kevin had no bond set for him, but the defendant requested a $5,000 bond with a 10% option. However, the situation had gotten more complicated than they had initially imagined. Judge Joseph Wright went through Kevin's violent record, reading them to everyone in the courtroom. Some of the crimes included destruction, first-degree assault, and a weapon conviction. Therefore, he was not convinced that $5,000 was fair, although everyone pushed for that. It was Tarika's case. Quite right, but it had gotten bigger than just her. Kevin was now considered a threat to society, and a release of such magnitude would require a higher bond value to match it. What you're about to hear is Kevin's bond hearing I managed to source for you.
Mr. Reynolds is currently being held in no bond. We are asking that you set a bond, Your Honor, to a $5,000 bond with a 10% option and pretrial release.
I have had occasion to speak to Ms. Jones. She indicates that she is not in fear of him and that she, in fact, wants him home.
The facts read as a fairly violent episode. And then if I look at his record, destruction, conviction for assault, which is what this case is actually charged as, first-degree assault. Another conviction for assault, a weapons conviction as well. He believes he got off on probation 2 days ago.
Ms. Jones disputes some of the allegations in the statement of charges, Your Honor. I believe that a $5,000 bond is appropriate in this matter.
I disagree. For all the reasons I said, for public safety, for the record, for the way the facts read, I'll set a bond. It'll be $20,000.
As you have heard, the judge set Kevin's bond at $20,000, and with Kevin financially incapacitated in jail, the bond would be paid by someone that raised eyebrows. From the sole help of Tarika, the bond was raised and Kevin was finally free. This move would have devastating consequences, but would mean nothing if we do not at this time introduce a key figure in this story, Jalissa Walls Harris. Jalissa was Tarika's stepsister. She was born on October 25, 1993, and grew up in Maryland as well. Jalissa was known for her vibrant personality and her close relationship with her family, particularly her stepsister Tarika. She was a supportive and caring individual who found herself entangled in the complexities of Tarika's life, including her troubled relationship with Kevin. Now, with that being established, Kevin, bailed from jail, returns to Tarika's life. The shocking part of this is that things never even got better again before they got worse this time. In fact, over the next few days, tensions between Tarika and Kevin continued to rise. The relationship was marked by domestic violence, and Tarika's family and friends were concerned about her safety. Despite these concerns, Tarika remained in the relationship because Kevin paid some of the bills. And now, things were about to get even worse for Tarika, and this time, permanently. Just 6 days after his release from jail, which happened to fall on the evening of March 7th, 2016, Kevin went to Tarika's apartment in the Cheverly Station complex in Cheverly, Maryland. An argument ensued between them, likely fueled by the ongoing tensions and unresolved issues in their relationship. Neighbors reported hearing loud arguing, followed by 3 gunshots. The argument between Tarika and Kevin escalated into violence, and with Tarika's stepsister Jalissa present, and with everyone aware of Kevin's violent nature, it is safe to say that she must have tried to interfere. Maybe not violently, but if she interfered at all, this had dire consequences. In a tragic turn of events, Kevin pulled out a gun and shot both Tarika and Jalissa, who tried to control the situation. Both women fell under the kitchen table. This wasn't the most troubling part of everything. The shooting was witnessed by one of Tarika's young children, a 5-year-old daughter, who was also Kevin's daughter and who was present in the apartment. Police were quickly called to the scene after reports of gunshots. Upon arrival, they found both Tarika and Jalissa dead from multiple gunshot wounds.
Tonight, State's Attorney Angela Alsobrooks reviewing exactly how that could have happened.
I wish we had kept him in jail.
As we first reported yesterday, Reynolds was locked up March 1st, accused of brutally beating Tarika Jones, pointing a gun at her, making threats. He would still be locked up on a no-bond status if Jones had not gone to Reynolds' bond review and recanted her story of the assault. Judge Joseph Wright set the bond at $20,000.
She did pay to have him removed from jail. And this is the worst case scenario.
The police launched an immediate investigation into the double homicide, with Kevin identified as the prime suspect. A manhunt began. Police searched for him in the area, alerting nearby jurisdictions to be on the lookout for him. However, they were in for the surprise of a lifetime. The next morning, on March 8, 2016, police found Kevin dead in Hanover County, Virginia. He had taken his own life with a self-inflicted wound using the same weapon, ending the manhunt and bringing a tragic conclusion to the events. The news of the double homicide and Kevin's subsequent death was one that the community did not respond to with pleasure.
Think about you, and if there's a child involved, you have to think about you and that child. That comes first before any type of other relationship.
Residents of the Cheverly Station apartments were deeply disturbed by the incident, especially since it occurred in a place they considered safe. Neighbors expressed sadness and disbelief, stating how much people didn't value life anymore.
She wanted to make something out of herself, 27 with 3 children or not. She still wanted to come out of poverty. She wanted to be the best mother that she could be. It's just sad because she doesn't get that chance.
Tarika was remembered as a kind and outgoing person who was studying to become a dental hygienist. Jalissa was described as a vibrant young woman with aspirations to become a vocalist. Family members and friends shared fond memories of both women, highlighting their positive impact on those around them. The community rallied around Tarika's children, who were left without a mother. Neighbors and friends expressed sympathy for the children who had witnessed the traumatic event. A GoFundMe page was set up to help cover funeral expenses for Jalissa Walls Harris. The incident brought attention to the issue of domestic violence in Prince George's County. It marked the 8th domestic violence-related homicide in the county for that year. State's Attorney Angela Alsobrooks emphasized the need for stronger laws to protect victims of domestic abuse. But who failed the deceased in this case? Was it the laws? This story is another one of those stories where the final outcome could have been prevented. While some may be quick to crucify Tarika for posting bond, we cannot underscore the trauma she must have been going through at that point in time, having to go through a series of abuse by the man she obviously loved the most, after which fighting for her life made her to call the police on him. As we pause to reflect, our attention shifts 370 miles away.
Get your ass in the car. Get your ass in the car. Get your ass in the car.
A lively 27-year-old mother had just paid bail for someone she called her best friend for a long period of time, but that man was not a best friend because of what he did. A day after she had bailed him out, police received another call from her, and they could only hear her voice in the background asking for forgiveness and statements like, "Are you going to kill me?" And what followed was heartbreaking. A few moments later, another call from a different woman reached the police and sadly discovered a 27-year-old mother dead. This is the heartbreaking story of Alika Simmons, another mother gone too soon. This story will be taking us to Lithonia, Georgia, a small city located in DeKalb County. According to recent statistics, Lithonia has been plagued with high levels of crime, with a violent crime rate of 62.5. Unfortunately, Alika would also become the victim of a violent homicide. Alika Simmons was born in a small family and had a brother called Roland, who she loved very much. Originally from Queens, New York, Alika moved to Atlanta, Georgia when she was young. Alika didn't have a stable upbringing. You see, her biological parents didn't raise her, and her relationship with her family was complicated. So Alika worked hard to support herself, holding down several odd jobs as a housekeeper, construction worker, and a manager at Neiman Marcus. These different jobs brought in most of her income, and she wasn't shy about her work either. According to her social media, Alika also worked as a stripper at one strip club, confident and unapologetic about her choices. She'd post pictures and videos online, showing off her bold personality.
Yeah, no hanging on decent top my shit. Click, click, and all these bad bitches, man, they want the.
Everything was going on well for Alika until she started a relationship with 32-year-old Otis Dennis Walker. Otis lived with his mother in Lithonia, Georgia, so Alika would go to visit him, and sometimes she would sleep over in the apartment and then return the next day. Just like every relationship, theirs started with a lot of passion and excitement. They were all about each other in the beginning and were clearly in love. It originally seemed like she was in the perfect relationship with all the love she was getting, but things took a turn as the months went on. Their intense connection quickly led to arguments, and the fights eventually became physical. People close to the couple had mixed opinions about their relationship. Some thought Otis was the problem, while others believed Alika played her part in the drama. Friends close to Alika advised her to let go of the relationship because Otis had deep-rooted anger issues, which would sometimes lead to him making dangerous threats to Alika. But Alika decided to keep dating him out of the love she had for him. Otis's issues weren't just indoors. It had gotten him in scuffles with the authorities. He had a history of violence and arrests for crimes like aggravated assault and family violence. Police had been called to their home several times because of their fights, and the situation seemed to escalate each time. But in one of the many reported incidents, the police arrested Otis after he was caught pushing and dragging Alika around. However, his time in jail was cut short because Alika herself decided to bail him out. The very next day he was arrested. But what Alika did not know was that Otis was deeply upset with his arrest, and that night he spent in jail. Otis was planning the worst and last story for her. Now, You remember that Alika used to visit and sleep over at Otis's mother's apartment. This case was on those nights and a day after Alika had paid bail for Otis. It was the 31st of July, 2019. Around midnight, Alika had made several calls to 911. In one of the calls, her voice was shaky and full of fear. She said, "This is Alika Simmons. If anything happens to me." But before she could say more, an argument broke out in the background. The dispatcher could hear her confronting Otis saying, "Are you threatening me? You're going to kill me?" Then the call suddenly went silent. This kind of call was so scary that in response to Alika's call for help, the DeKalb County Police Department dispatched officers to her residence on the 4800 block of Hodgdon Corners Cove in Lithonia. However, upon their arrival, they found the home quiet and dark without any signs of the argument they had heard earlier. Therefore, the police left the premises. Sharon Walker, Otis's mother, was asleep when a younger family member knocked on her door to tell her the police had been at the house. Therefore, she woke up and went to check on Otis and Alika, who were in Otis's room. As usual, the two were in an intense quarrel that seemed like it would get physical. Remember, this was just after Alika called 911. Sensing something was off, Sharon offered to give Alika a ride back to her house, hoping to defuse the situation. But as she stepped away to grab her car keys, Otis closed the door, then a gunshot echoed through the house. Sharon rushed back to the room, only to find Alika had been shot. She was badly wounded, and there was nothing anyone could do to save her. This shocking event left Sharon completely terrified. She ran along with the other younger family members present at the house to a neighbor's house for help. There, Sharon called 911 requesting help, and an officer by the name Derek Nunn, who had been at the house earlier that night, returned with 2 other officers after another call. As they approached the front yard, Otis Walker started shooting and fired 19 rounds before escaping into the nearby woods. He shot Officer Nunn 4 times before fleeing. Because of his injuries, Officer Nunn was immediately rushed to the Grady Memorial Hospital, where he underwent emergency surgery before staying at the hospital for about a week.
Upon arrival, officers were immediately fired upon by an unknown suspect hiding between 2 residences. Officers returned fire. One of our officers was struck multiple times and was immediately evacuated and transported to a local area hospital for further medical treatment.
After the shooting, Otis went into hiding, and news of his disappearance spread quickly. Authorities issued a warning, informing the public that Otis was armed and dangerous. They explained the crimes he had committed, urging everyone to stay vigilant and report any sightings. As the search increased, the tension in the area grew, with many fearing the violent man on the loose. A manhunt was launched, and a $10,000 reward was offered to whoever could find Otis. But after a week-long manhunt, he was finally apprehended at a gas station in Lithonia on August 8, 2019, and arrested. When Otis Walker was finally captured, he was found with a signed apology addressed to Officer Nunn and the police department. During his trial, Otis attempted to justify his actions, claiming he shot his girlfriend Alika in self-defense. He also argued that when he shot at the officers, his intention was not to harm them but to shoot at the ground in an attempt to provoke them into shooting him instead. However, the district attorney's office firmly disputed these claims. The evidence, particularly the trajectory of the shots that hit Officer Nunn, showed that Otis had aimed directly at the officer, not at the ground as he had insisted. This crucial detail undermined his defense and exposed the truth behind his violent actions. After many years of back-and-forth trials, on November 8, 2023, Otis Walker was found guilty on all charges, including malice murder, felony murder, 3 counts of aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer, and possession of a firearm. The jury's decision was a mix of the evidence presented throughout the trial, which painted a clear picture of the violence Walker had caused. In light of his actions, the judge sentenced him to life in prison, plus an additional 65 years. This sentence ensured that Otis would never have the chance to harm anyone again, and it served as a small measure of justice for Alika Simmons, her family, and the law enforcement officers who were affected by his brutal actions. This case, just like many cases of abuse, leaves not only the family of the victim but friends and the community at large questioning so many possibilities as to how it could have been resolved better and how the life of the deceased could have been saved. Many are questioning whether things could have turned out differently if the police had taken stronger action during their first visit to Alika's home. When officers responded to her initial 911 call, they didn't make contact with her, despite the disturbing nature of the call. It raises concerns about why authorities didn't insist on speaking with her directly to ensure her safety. While some are of the opinion that Otis decided to unalive Alika because she was fed up with his toxicity and wanted to leave him, Alika's brother, Roland Simmons, opened a GoFundMe page to pay for the funeral and expressed that he was very sad and hurt about the situation. Ashley Hill, a close friend of Alika Simmons, recounted how she repeatedly urged Simmons to leave Walker, citing his abusive behavior.
She would say, I love him. I don't want to leave him like everybody else leave him.
Even her neighbor, Tammy Gresham, claimed that the two were planning to end the relationship before the tragic crime happened.
And I know you was trying to get away from her, and she kept bothering you and bothering you.
Alika was eventually laid to rest on Saturday, August 10th, 2019. A funeral service was held at New Birth Fellowship of Praise in Griffin, Georgia, where Apostle Beatrice Small delivered the eulogy. She was remembered by her loved ones and community members who attended the burial for support. On July 10th, 2022, police received a call about a disturbance at an apartment complex. Officers rushed to the scene, prepared for anything but not for what lay ahead. When they forced their way inside, they found a nightmare. 3 bodies were lying there: the suspect's mother, his stepfather, and his girlfriend, the one who seemed to be his main target. One female officer stated that she had never seen such level of cruelty in her entire career.
Will I ever get over this? I will never get over somebody doing this to my niece.
The story began a month earlier on June 2nd, 2022. Late that night, the suspect and his girlfriend had a terrible argument. Known for his jealous nature, he demanded her phone password, but she refused. Her defiance to give out the password enraged him, and he struck her repeatedly. As his anger deepened, he poured gasoline on her leg, then went looking for a lighter. In that horrifying moment, she saw a slim chance to escape and took it. Running out into the dark streets, it was 3 a.m., and she sprinted to a neighbor's house. When she rang the doorbell, her heart pounded until finally the door opened. The neighbor saw her distress, called the police, and the man fled. But the story didn't end there. His mother posted bail and he was released. Just 2 days later, his mother, stepfather, and girlfriend were found dead. This is the horrifying story of Zalea Frazier. This story takes us all the way to Detroit, Michigan, a city with a complex history shaped by economic shifts and social challenges that have influenced its crime rate. Zalea Frazier was a woman whose kindness and vibrant spirit was evident in everything she did. She had a natural charm and an uncanny ability to steer life in the direction she wanted, a mix of determination and grace that made her unforgettable to everyone she met. So, when this story saturated, people remember all her good character about her. Growing up with 6 siblings, Zalea witnessed firsthand the battles her family endured. She watched as her brother fought bravely against cancer, and as her sister faced the lifelong challenges of cerebral palsy.
That's why she wanted to become a nurse.
These experiences left a profound impact on her, igniting a deep-seated desire to help others, especially those facing medical struggles. Zalea wasn't just pursuing nursing for a career. It was a mission born from her own family's trials, a calling that went far beyond herself. Whatever it was, it captured the heart of a boy named Jonathan Welch. They started dating when she was just 16, and he was 17. 2 young souls completely smitten with each other. Their bond was so strong that everyone around them believed they were destined for a lifetime together. Their love story unfolded publicly on social media, where they posted about their relationship with pride, sparking both admiration and a hint of envy from others. When they celebrated their 6th anniversary in October 2020, they were expecting a baby. The news brought them boundless joy, and they shared it eagerly with friends and family.
Man, he get to carry on this greatness.
We have our boy.
He gotta be great. He gotta be great. He gotta be great. He got to. That another victory for Big Dog. Big Dog doing another victory for Dog. Yeah.
Zalea took to social media to express her excitement, reassuring her unborn child of her love and promising a world of support. Jonathan, too, embraced the role of a soon-to-be father, stepping up with a commitment to build a strong foundation for their little family. Together, they moved forward as a team, carefully planning for their baby's arrival and creating a world filled with love and safety. But beneath the surface of their shared joy and dreams, a shadow loomed. A darkness neither of them could yet see, waiting to change everything. Zalea was strikingly beautiful, and she did attract plenty of attention online. Men often left flirty or inappropriate comments, but this was simply part of the social media world she was building for herself, hoping for brand collaborations to support her boutique and her modeling career. Yet, Jonathan couldn't accept this. The more popular she became, the more his jealousy festered, reaching a point where he began to accuse her of cheating. His insecurity reached such extremes that he demanded access to her phone, scouring through messages and notifications for proof of betrayal. Though he never found anything, his relentless searching didn't calm his fears. On June 2nd, 2022 at approximately 3 a.m., their newborn baby started crying, so both Jonathan and Frazier woke up to the noise. The mother, as expected, woke up promptly to attend to her baby, and Jonathan, just in bed, eyes open but doing nothing. After a short while, idle Jonathan grabbed Frazier's cell phone that was on the bedside table and swiped, but the phone was locked. He asked the password to Frazier's cell phone. When Frazier refused, Jonathan jumped out of their bed and reached the power extension cord, wrapping it around her neck and repeatedly applying and releasing pressure. Remember, Frazier had just given birth to their new baby, so she was physically too weak to fight back. Having her tied up with the cord, Jonathan, who had gasoline hidden in their bedroom, poured it on Frazier's body, specifically between her legs. He did not stop on that. Jonathan heated a metal spatula on the stove to burn Frazier's arms and legs. He attempted to sexually assault her with a large pole during the attack. Also, he beat her several times with his belt and threatened her with a power drill. But this wasn't even the most shocking part of this brutal morning. The most shocking part was that Jonathan was so determined to continue hitting her that even when he was tired, he rested and then continued again after gathering some strength. The attack lasted for approximately 4 hours.
Held her hostage for hours. He beat her, and when he got tired, he rested and beat her some more. What he did, torture. He poured gasoline on her. He wanted to kill her.
Frazier managed to convince Jonathan to remove the extension cord so she could tend to their crying child. When he did, Frazier ran out of the front door fully naked to a neighbor's house. Jonathan chased her frantically, hoping to get a hold of her before she could reach the neighbor's house. But the adrenaline of someone fighting for her life was too much to handle.
My sister was fully, she ran out the house and ran to a nearby neighbor house to get help. How do you let somebody out that did that to somebody? How do you let them out?
And Zalea made sure to be on the front foot. Luckily for her, the neighbors responded immediately. Jonathan followed her to the neighbor's porch, attempted to pull her back, but eventually left. The neighbors took Frazier in, provided her with a blanket, and called 911. 911 arrived and met Zalea in a devastating state, but she was still able to give the exact description of Jonathan and the car he was using. A bolo was issued immediately, and in no time, his location was revealed. Zalea was taken to the hospital to assess the severity of the injuries and appropriate treatment. Detroit police officers were dispatched to the scene at 7:24 a.m. and arrested Jonathan later that day at 11:24 a.m. Following the attack, Jonathan was charged with multiple felonies, including torture, home invasion, criminal conduct, assault with intent to commit sexual penetration, assault with intent to do great bodily harm, and 3 counts of felonious assault. Despite the severity of the charges, Jonathan was issued a $100,000 bond, 10% cash, or surety, by Magistrate Don White. With 10% cash required, this meant that Jonathan would be out of jail on $10,000 bond. In no time, his mother was able to raise the bond amount and get him out of jail. But he was ordered to have no contact with Zelaya, and he was to wear a GPS tether and also stay in his mother's house. Many, especially at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, were stunned by the low bond set for Jonathan, given the trauma he had put Zelaya through.
$10,000 is easy to come up with. It's people that steal something from a store that would get more than $10,000. You tortured somebody, you assaulted somebody, and you got out with paying $10,000.
The prosecutor's office vowed to push for a higher bond once they gathered substantial evidence to support Zelaya's claims. But Zelaya, meanwhile, was trying to heal and move on. She moved to her parents' family. She was finding a sense of peace and freedom she hadn't felt in far too long. She desperately needed that break, and her family, seeing the toll everything had taken on her, rallied to give her a much-needed reprieve. On July 10th, 2022, her family organized a gathering in her honor, filling the day with laughter and warmth. It was a celebration of Zelaya's strength and her fresh start.
When I see you.
A day filled with joy and hope for the future. Yet, tragically, no one knew this would be the last time they'd see her. Later that same day, Jonathan's mother reached out to Zelaya, asking her to come by for a talk. She promised that Jonathan wasn't there, trying to reassure Zelaya of her safety. In truth, Zelaya no longer feared him being around. Part of her still hoped he would change, that he would become the partner she had once loved and the father their child deserved. Just minutes after Zelaya honored the visit, 911 was called to Jonathan's mom's vicinity. When police arrived, they were met with the shock of a lifetime. Jonathan's mother lay there with a knife stuck in her back. Apparently, she managed to crawl her way to a neighbor's house and begged that they call 911. When she asked who did that to her, there was only one name on her lips: Jonathan. While the reason he went that far was unknown, the police still had one big task on their hands. Inside Jonathan's mother's house was Zelaya, his stepfather, and the one-year-old baby. The police knew they had a situation on their hands and needed to act fast. But what they didn't know was that the situation was a dress rehearsal compared to what they were going to meet in the home. The police went to the home immediately, demanding that Jonathan come out. Jonathan turned a deaf ear toward them and instead chose to engage them in a gun battle. Before that, neighbors sighted him lowering the one-year-old child through the window and decided to go rescue the baby. Luckily for them, the baby was unharmed. However, they still needed to save the two people in the home with Jonathan. Meanwhile, a fierce standoff had ensued with both officers and Jonathan firing at each other. Seeing he stood no chance, he lit the house with him inside on fire. Frantic efforts were made to flush him out while also trying to put out the fire. After 7 hours, Jonathan finally surrendered himself to the police. They immediately went to save Zelaya and his stepfather and were met with a horrific sight. Both bodies lay lifeless, unalived by blunt force trauma. Jonathan's mother was in critical condition at the time and was rushed to the hospital. After Jonathan Welch's mother, Flossie Nicole Bray, was rushed to the hospital, she fought for her life but ultimately succumbed to her injuries on July 16, 2022.
The third victim of a tragic family attack in Harper Woods has died tonight. The suspect is facing a slew of charges.
The incident unfolded inside a home on Kenosha earlier this month, just days after the suspect was released on bond.
Her death marked the third in a tragic series of events that had started in the Bray home in Harper Woods. Welch, already in custody after a 7-hour standoff with police at his mother's house, faced a series of charges. These included 3 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of his mother, Flossie Bray, his stepfather, Robert Bray Jr., and his girlfriend, Zelaya Frazier. Additionally, he was charged with assault with intent to murder, second-degree arson, felonious assault, and felony firearm offenses. The family of Zelaya was beyond devastated when they heard of the news, wondering why Zelaya had accepted the invitation. It was later uncovered that Jonathan was also responsible for the murder of Natayla Morse, a 24-year-old woman found dead in a field on Detroit's East Side on June 4, 2022. Jonathan was accused of murdering Morse through blunt force trauma to the head, stealing her car, and setting it ablaze.
It's hard to believe that someone would just beat a woman to death and then throw her body into a field just like this one. Family members still can't believe to this day that it happened.
He faced charges for this fourth murder, which had occurred even before his initial arrest in June 2022. In a preliminary examination held in August 2022, the court reviewed the extensive list of charges and the details surrounding each assault, including the violent attack on Zalea Frazier in June 2022. By July 2023, Jonathan Welch had pleaded guilty to all charges connected to the deaths of his family members, his girlfriend, and Natayla Morse. On November 1st, 2023, Jonathan was sentenced to 45 to 70 years in prison for the murders of 3, with an additional sentence of 20 to 40 years for the murder of Natayla Morse. The sentences were ordered to be served concurrently, marking the end of a deeply tragic and violent series of events. Given that Jonathan repeatedly demonstrated he was a danger to Zalea, their child, and society as a whole, should he have been granted bond at all? Doesn't allowing him a bond contradict the purpose of a correctional system? Was paying that bond supposed to suggest he would change his behavior? Should the authorities bear full responsibility for this tragedy?
Definitely broken. They should never let him out. They let him out of jail. And he killed my sister. He killed my sister. They should never let him out of prison. I don't have nothing to say.
Police called the bond given to Welch an opportunity to kill.
He was given a chance with bond at that time and took his freedom as an opportunity to finish the job and kill victim Frazier.
And as for his mother, did she perhaps see signs of Jonathan's abusive behavior and choose to ignore them? Or was she genuinely unaware of how dangerous he was? We would love to extend our deepest condolences to the family and friends of Zalea Frazier and everyone affected by her death.